I suppose I should give things a personal element by talking about how I became a nomad. I suppose I just had got into like a typical sort of normie lifestyle. After uni, I worked a job that I got fired from at my university. Got fired for incompetence. Was just completely mentally checked out. Did not give a toss. And then I was in the public sector in a job where it was much more difficult to get fired. Essentially, if I just kept my head down, I could subsist there. But it was a completely alienating and soul destroying um, job, and in a sort of destructive way, I wanted to do crazy shit. So I was bouncing off the walls. So the first trip I organized was a trip to North Korea, um, and I convinced my best friend to go with me, and we went on a tour there. And I did 14 days on a political tour in North Korea. Political tour being in the sense that obviously the itinerary concerned itself with political things, and I thought it would be an opportunity to ask them about Juche ideology and to what extent it's informed by Marxism and so on. And that was like jumping in at the deep end because it was just a sort of YOLO, I don't give a fuck kind of thing. And I followed that up immediately after because I was so interested as a teenager, like in the Soviet Union and the Cold War and communism, that I then did my next trip. I was like, well, I want to see the Soviet Union. So I went to Chernobyl, which was a really stupid thing in retrospect now because I understand that if someone, I went there on the logic that, oh, Chernobyl is a time capsule, right? It's a Soviet city that was just left alone. But the thing is, if you want to see a Soviet city, you can just go to much of the Eastern Bloc. It's all still there and still intact in that original form. But I didn't know that at the time. I think I was quite naive. Um, Obviously, I guess everybody's played that level on Call of Duty 4 and played the Stalker video game. So I was all over Chernobyl as an idea. And I went there, went to Ukraine, and I sort of got infected. And what am I trying to say in so many words, I guess, is that I can't stay put. I have wanderlust, and I was just ready to go traveling. Without exception, maybe some people are being polite, but without exception, honest to God, every person I tell about it is like expresses some degree of envy. Says, "Oh my God, that's amazing," or "That's so cool," or whatever. Like, or even to the point you feel jealous. There might be some self-disparaging joke about, "Oh God, I wish I could get away," or "Why did you come back?" That sort of thing. Like, it's because the nomad lifestyle is essentially something to aspire to because it is obviously people that have like kids, there are still dedicated family people out there. To them, it sounds nice, but I think they wouldn't want to give up what they've got. They know that if they have a kid and they're raising them right, they have to stay put. But to a lot of people, it's the freedom because nobody likes being a wage slave, right? So it is really a goal to aspire to. I was very disillusioned by the kinds of people I was meeting, namely the other travelers. So let's just say that there are some cities in the world that attract remote workers or, well, nomads who are of a very sort of self indulgent and narcissistic persuasion. And I very much believe that when we see something in other people that we don't like and that we want to judge them for, that's often because they're serving as a reflection of something that we don't like in ourselves. And in my case, I was utterly baffled by how lacking in self reflection or a desire for higher purpose that a lot of the people I was meeting are. So, to offer one anecdote, my housemate is a Dutch guy, and he was nice enough, and we got along, but he was an unashamed sex tourist. And he, all of his free time, his entire rationale for being there was dedicated to Tinder, working out, and fucking. And he didn't care if they'd been sleeping with other men and stuff. I was like, what is there to them? Like, can you talk to them? Do you respect them as people? And he said, no, they're just hunks of meat. And when he wants an interesting conversation, he talks to a man. And it was just such a strange paradox to me that someone who can make it their immediate, all-consuming goal to pursue sex with people they don't think of as any better than me. Like, so we would often, like, if there was an evening where neither of us had anything to do, we would just sit out in our house and just talk into the night. And I would ask him about, like, whether he doesn't want something more, whether he doesn't feel a call to responsibility, because that's what was eating me up. This sense that I had to aspire to something more, that I was feeling empty because I was living a lifestyle wherein I'd rejected any and all responsibility, and that I needed to find purpose through responsibility. I think people are lied to today in the sense that we're we're told to aim for happiness as if that's the specific goal that we should be born to pursue. But that's told to us without this understanding that happiness is more of an incidental thing to leading a well-rounded, fulfilling life. And a big part of that, I think, especially if you're a man, is assuming responsibility and having people that depend on you. And the nomad lifestyle is a rejection of all of that. So, this was all a very long winded way to say I was feeling dissatisfied with the status quo of the life I was living. And I was baffled by the people around me. It's quite interesting how any atheist and any individualist can sort of, with some hubris that I guess is more apparent when you're young, when you're a teenager or young adult, feel that you actually have a unique insight into things, that you yourself are an individual, perhaps with some original viewpoints. In my own case, I look back on myself, and it's hard not to see it all as very predictable and stereotypical. But I was born into a non-religious household. My mother loosely believed in, like, a god, but wasn't practicing. Didn't go to church. Didn't really, teach me any religious values. My father was an actual atheist, but they did send me to a Christian primary school, Church of England to be specific, and I was baptized. So I was exposed to religion, but I think in the same way that a lot of British people are, wherein well, we used to joke that people that went to my primary school, you go to a Church of England school, and it produces atheists. Like, the invariable result of having a religious education is that you come out an atheist. And I suppose that's just a result of the state that the Church of England is in nowadays, really. It's almost a half-hearted attempt to bring people into religiosity, because they're so terrified of their diminished status and compounding that further that it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, wherein they are ever more accommodating and ever less stringent in what they require of people. And I don't think they understand there is a call to order. There were times in my life where I had a loose conception of God. I remember believing in him as a little kid, but as I got older and I felt I could rationalize and reason, it just seemed stupid. There was no God, because I felt like, I used to joke, why aren't there dinosaurs in the Bible? Like, even as a little kid, I remember that. I asked my RE teacher about why there aren't any dinosaurs in the Bible. But I think in a sort of typical, let's say, NPC-esque fashion, growing up in a society where religion was not in the zeitgeist meant that I myself did not become religious. Anyway, that's all that is to say I was an atheist. So to come back to me in Colombia, I was supposed to stay there another month, making it 3 months total. I'd been there 2 months up to that point, and then go to Argentina for 3 months. But I decided to cut everything short and to go back to Britain, thinking I probably would never return to Latin America again. And knowing these opportunities were out there, I decided that I should look up ayahuasca retreats before I leave, because I'd always been curious about hallucinogens, that sort of thing. And I've always been very interested in my own state of mind and knowing myself and self-mastery. So obviously the idea of, like, hallucinogenics was interesting for pursuing that avenue. I will say up front that I had watched Alex's videos on DMT, so unfortunately I can't say I went in there as a blank slate. So I found this ayahuasca day where they would drive us out to a shaman's house, and we would drink this thick black tea, which they call a medicine. They told us that anything we see would be something that exists within us ourselves. That it's a medicine about confronting yourself. So the people administering it were very keen that we'd be under the impression that we're more delving into our own psyche than anything spiritual. I think the shaman, who was surprisingly young, like I can't say I'm sure this was a real religious figure, but this shaman seemed to live there with his family. And out back of the house, they had erected like a corrugated iron roof with wooden pallets laid underneath with pillows and sort of a thick bedding mat laid on each one. And we were told to pick which ones we wanted. I should say that it was a dirt floor. Well, not dirt, I guess sand. Sorry, it was sand. But what they would do is if someone vomited, they would just bury it in the sand. So pretty filthy. They gave us the tea, and we were told it would take about 40 minutes to come into effect. So participants just walked around, chatted a bit. But I picked a place that was by the fire, and I picked that for spiritual reasons. I thought, well, fire is something that seems to have had like a central place in human spirituality. So I lay down next to the fire, thinking I could look into the fire. As I did that, the back of this house and the roof above it became like very warm. I could see the colors becoming richer. But if I focused again or started thinking, it snapped out of it, like straight back to reality. Now, I'll say now that this is a defining thing I noticed about ayahuasca. You do hallucinate, but you're never out of reality. You can still see everything around you. It's more what you see is projected on top of what you're seeing. And the way that things distort, let's say the static objects in your vision, the way they distort is immediately undone the moment you like move your eyes or move your head, look around. So it's very interesting in that respect, compared to like full-on DMT, which I think is a hallucination you can't escape from, as I understand. If you close your eyes, you see things. And I don't know if someone on full-on DMT can still see their environment or not. I could see my environment, it was changing. But I was just aware of it on the periphery of my vision, because again, if I looked specifically at things, it sort of dissipated a bit. But that's when I realized, okay, this is doing something. I think other people that have done hallucinogens or anything like ayahuasca or DMT will know what I'm saying. You don't hear a voice. It's more the thought appears in your own brain. You answer yourself, but the thought feels external. So I thought about cornerstones of faith, and the first question I asked was why do people suffer? I wanted to concentrate on suffering. Thinking about it, contemplating suffering, the logs in the fire that were in front of me started to change. And this will sound quite disturbing if I describe it. You have to understand this within the context of me feeling completely safe and quite removed from what I was seeing. But the logs in the fire became severed limbs, arms and legs, sort of just jutting out of this fire. And there was a set of legs that still had the trousers on them, or shorts, I guess. But they were burning away and exposing like blistering flesh underneath. And where the leg had its knee, the back of that knee had an eye in it that was looking at me. And I stared into that eye and I tried to use it as a sort of frame of reference. The severed limbs were sort of grey and green, but when I focused on the flames that were lapping at them and burning them, focusing on them made the red become a richer, more powerful color. And I perceived that they were coming from a grate under the fire. These flames were lapping up from underneath. And the answer that was in my head was that suffering enables civilization. Suffering enables all of us to leave our lives. Basically, all of human existence is predicated on the suffering of others. There is always an unlucky few who must suffer.